Devotions. Listen, we're so glad that you are watching Devotions. It is so important to have routine in your life and to be able to get into the Word of God and hear what He has to say for us. So we're excited that you're with us today, and we hope that you'll share this with people because there's so many people that need to hear about Jesus, and this is a great way to do that.
So I've been kind of just chewing through one of my favorite characters in the Bible, and that's the story of Joseph. And Joseph's this amazing story in the Old Testament found in Genesis, and it spreads across about 15, 20 chapters of Genesis. And it's the story of this guy who had a dream from God, who then gets sold into slavery and then ends up being accused falsely and being thrown into prison. And then eventually Pharaoh, the leader over all of Egypt, has this dream, and Joseph comes in and interprets it, and Joseph ends up becoming the second in charge and ends up leading the nation of Israel, or nation of Egypt. His brothers in the nation of Israel come over to Egypt, and in there they flourish and become a prosperous nation until they end up in slavery. And it's a crazy, amazing story when you look at it. But there's something that hit me today that I was just wrestling through and thinking through in my own life, and hopefully it will make sense to you. And it's found in Genesis 41. It says this: in the morning, his mind was troubled. This is Pharaoh. In the morning, Pharaoh's mind was troubled. So he sent for all the magicians and the wise men of Egypt. And Pharaoh told him his dream, and no one could interpret it for him. Now, he's sitting, he's the king, he's Pharaoh, he's the leader of the Egyptians. He has this crazy dream. He can't figure out, but he knows that it's valuable, he knows it's important. And he sends for all the wise men, all the magicians, all the sorcerers, all the sky readers, all of those people. He brings them all into a room, and no one has the ability to interpret what God is saying in this moment. And I kind of felt like I've had moments like that, right? I've had the amazing opportunity to preach all over the globe in multiple different countries. And honestly, it stresses me out to preach in another country because, one, I don't know the culture as well, and two, I don't know if I can trust the interpreter saying. One time I was preaching, and I'm like going for gold, thinking I'm doing something good, and then the interpreter takes it, he says something, and then the congregation laughed. I'm like, I didn't say a joke there.
Not a laughing
I was pretty confident that what I was preaching my heart out, and the interpreter had a whole nother message. He was just preaching. And he preached a good message. They thought I was good. I had no idea what actually was going on, right? We're actually, at the end of this month, being broadcast in Russia. It's actually really cool. TBN Russia has reached out to us as an organization, and we've been able to partner with them. And so starting at the end of this month, every Tuesday, our experience that we have here is being broadcast in Russia in a whole bunch of different countries. But they're taking our experience, they're taking my preaching and Amber's hosting.
And they're interpreting it.
They're interpreting it. They're translating Russian. And they're interpreting it. And people are, so you'll be able to watch it, and it'll be me, but with a Russian accent and a Russian language. And so they sent us the advertisement the other day that they've now posted, and it's on TBN right now, and it's playing.
And we have no idea.
We have no idea what they're saying. It could be like, check out this church. Who do they think they're? Like, who knows what it's saying? It could be like, we had nothing else to fill this time slot with, so we got this crazy Canadian, right? Like it could be saying anything, but I have no ability to interpret what's actually being said. I actually went to the webpage the other day just to kind of...
Did you do like Google Translate?
Well, no, I went to TBN's webpage, TBN Russia's webpage, and they have this entire write-up about us in Russian.
I'm sure it's really good.
I'm sure it's saying awesome stuff. I have no idea what it's saying, what they're saying about us. And even like this thing popped up, and it was probably like, do you want to accept cookies, yes or no? But I couldn't even understand what that was.
Don't accept either.
I was like, Putin's going to be watching all my emails. I don't know. So I just deleted it. Right? I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But have you ever been in a spot where you've been misinterpreted? Have you ever been in that spot in your life where you said something? I know that you've never been in this spot.
I was just about to say, I feel like every time we have an argument, I say one thing and you hear something else.
Yes, dear, you're right. See, what did you interpret there? Right, but if you're in a spot where you've said something or done something and you've been misinterpreted, it can be so frustrating. I get this all the time, right?
So frustrating.
Because I think it's so funny. I can speak to a room full of people, And like 4 or 5 different people will interpret different things from that. That's why even when I have meetings with my staff, especially if let's call it a...
Come to Jesus meeting?
No, that sounds weird. Let's just talk that it would be a very important meeting with our staff. I will actually say at the end of that meeting with that staff member, what did you hear me say?
What did you hear me say?
What are you taking from this? Because sometimes they don't hear, they got lost in something else. They didn't hear what I actually wanted them to hear. And then even with most of my staff, when I have a meeting with them where I'm asking them to do stuff, I will actually follow up with an email and say, hey, just so we're clear, these are the things that I asked of you, because I don't want there to be misinterpretation, because it's really frustrating when you've been misinterpreted. But I want to put a pause and challenge to us today. I feel like there's a lot of misinterpretation happening in society today. Mm-hmm. I feel like you can walk through the street right now, we're all so sensitive that someone looks at us the wrong way and we kind of take it personally. Or a friend didn't reach out to us when we felt they should have. And we're misinterpreting. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's a lot happening in people's lives. So many people right now are living on that edge of frustration. They're living on that edge of confusion and not sure what's happening.
Well, when people don't know what's happening and what's going on.
Right? And so there's become this idea that we walk down and we see someone and they look at us and we're like, they hate us. And they're sitting there completely lost in their own world, thinking about how they're going to deal with their kids at school and what if a second wave comes, how do they deal with their kids being home? They didn't even notice you on the street, but you've interpreted it as like they hate me. You've interpreted it as they're angry at me. You've interpreted it as no one likes me, I'm all alone. And that actually wasn't even the scenario at all. I want us to be careful of misinterpreting, to misinterpret what's being done around us. But the same thing, I want to pause for a second and talk about the church. The church, as in the universal sense, has been really diverse on how we're responding to this COVID situation. It's funny, I read some of the Facebook posts or stuff that's out there, and the church is interpreting that this is the end times. Jesus is returning imminently. Some are like, this is the persecution of the church. The church is being persecuted, and if we don't rise up and stand up and be aggressive politically, the church is going to be dismantled. Some are interpreting all these different kind of mindsets. I get them all the time. The church is bowing, we haven't opened, we're still online. So the church is bowing to Caesar. The church is letting the government dictate. The church, and there's all these ways that people are interpreting that what's happening right now is really bad, and it's going to be the destruction of the church unless we stand up and fight for our rights, unless we stand up and we do something about it, unless we, I actually talked to one person who's like, I don't care, I dare the government to come and try and stop us. I'm like, okay, that's a different approach, right? There's all this interpretation of like, we're having our rights ripped away from us and our rights being stolen from us and all of these things. And I want to bring us back to the story of Joseph. Pharaoh has this dream and no one can interpret it properly. And so someone says, hey, well, Joseph is a man of God and he can interpret. And he steps up and he interprets the dream. Joseph gets placed in this position of authority and power. And at the very end of the whole book in Genesis 50:20, Joseph makes this statement. He says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, the saving of many souls, which is now happening. What's he saying? He's saying, there may have been a season in my life where I interpreted what was happening to me, being sold into slavery, being set into prison, being forgotten about, all these things. I interpreted it as death and destruction. But that's actually not what God was doing or saying. God was working all things together for his good and put me in this position to save and rescue the people of Israel.
That's good.
I look at the church in Acts. What takes place, right? Stephen gets stoned. The church gets persecuted. Everyone disperses and scatters, right? And you can go, man, look, the interpretation is the devil's winning. The interpretation is, look, the church is dying out. The people of God are being scattered and spread, and the church is dying out. The church is over. The devil's won. But ultimately, what God did through that persecution and the spreading of the people was that it actually grew the church as they went into new locations and new territories and brought the gospel. I want us to be careful of buying into really good sound bites that feed our emotional desire to be together as a church. I want us to be careful at the mindset well, the church is persecuted, and if the church doesn't stand up and fight the government and just have church and forget the rules and the laws, or to be careful that the church is just bowing down to Satan and Satan's winning because if a second wave comes and we can't go to church, that'll be a whole whatever, to be very careful that we're interpreting that the enemy is winning right now. Because I actually think the opposite is happening. I think that every time that we interpret the enemy to be winning, we actually see how God is working all things together for his glory. We're actually seeing God moving in powerful ways. And I want to tell you, as a pastor of this church, we're seeing God move in powerful ways. Yeah. We're getting stories of people from other nations choosing Jesus because of this church. We're getting stories of people in our community who have found Jesus. I'm getting stopped on the street by people who are saying, hey, I watched you this week. I've never watched church before, but I've watched you this week. And man, I want to tell you, it impacted my life in such a crazy way. I want you to hear today that it's so easy to be tempted to interpret this situation of isolation and shutdowns and no live church as, oh, well, Jeff just wants holidays, weekends off, or the devil's winning, or we're not doing anything. But to actually see it from a different perspective, that maybe the interpretation is that the enemy intended to harm us, but God intended it for good. The saving of many souls, which is now happening. So I want to encourage you today on two things. One, be careful of jumping to conclusions about your coworkers or your friends or people on the street. Be careful of jumping to conclusions about what you are interpreting, you think about them. Remember, the enemy wants to take these things and put a foothold and destroy, kill, steal, and destroy. So be careful. Maybe that coworker is acting that way because they're scared and they're confused and they don't understand, or they don't know what to do with their family, or they got someone sick at home, or they're worried about their own health or their own finances. Maybe there's more of that happening in that person than their disdain for you. And secondly, let's not give the enemy praise or authority in thinking that he's winning here. He is not winning. God is winning. God is on the move. I just read of a church that's now over 100,000 people big online. That's a win for Jesus.
Huge win.
That church was never 100,000 people big live, but now they're 100,000 people big online. Yeah. Our church has grown. We're seeing stuff. The enemy has not won here, so don't interpret it wrong. God is on the move. Yeah. God is on the move. So don't let our insecurities watch a Russia ad and go, oh yeah, they're not saying good stuff about us.
They're saying good stuff
Let's
about
trust that God is in the lead. He's in directing this, and that we're seeing him do something awesome and amazing.
Yes. Thank you for watching us online. Keep sharing it online, because there are people out there that are grasping and looking for an online experience, and we can offer that. Have an amazing day, and we'll see you next time.